Welcome guys, welcome to my humble abode. I had a really good conversation with a client probably a few days ago, and this is sort of becoming a recurring theme where I get a lot of questions about what it's like to be a landlord. And I think there's been so many stories out there about what it's like to be a landlord in regards to tenants' rights and how complicated the process might be to evict someone. So because of that, people are always worried and wary, right? There's a lot of folks that might want to own an investment property or rent a property out, and they just don't want to do that because they don't know the ins and outs of what it means to be a landlord and what happens if your tenant don't pay you on time. You know, how do you go about telling them to leave, all that stuff. So I'm gonna create a few videos about that. So I'm gonna start with a really short video, and I had a client that said to me, what happens if my tenant doesn't pay? Like, where do I start? What do I do? So what we have to remember is the tenant board of the tribunal is really there to protect the rights of tenants. They're not there to be nice to landlords, right? It's all about the tenant and the tenant's rights, and I think that's a good thing. We don't want landlords taking advantage of tenants' rights. We don't want that at all. That's not good for anyone, right? We want to be fair. So with that said, what you have to do as a landlord is that you always have to operate within that mindset or those rights, right? So the whole thing, the whole process is about respecting and protecting tenants' rights. So you got to operate within that framework. So the first thing that you should be doing as a landlord is, and I love examples. So for example, typically, rent is due on the first of the month. So you have a tenant, their rent is due on the first of the month. So let's just assume that it's September 1st. So September 1st at 11:59 p.m., your rent is still not delivered to you. So what you should be doing as a landlord is you should be completing what's called an N4. And basically the N4 just states that your tenant, the following individual, in this case your tenant, owes you money, and it documents who the tenant is. So you would put in the tenant's first and last name, the property address, and the amount owing, right? So you're going to put down the amount owing. Let's just say it's a basement apartment in Brampton. Let's just say it's $1,100 a month for that basement apartment. So on that N4, you're going to basically fill out $1,100 because that's the amount owing in this example. And what you'll do on the second is you'll basically deliver it to the tenant. Now, you could do it a couple of ways. You can mail it. So if you don't live at the property, you could mail it, drop it in the mailbox, Canada Post mailbox, or you can just simply go to the property and drop it into the mail slot at the property. So wherever that individual picks up their mail, that's where you can kind of put it. So if there's a mail slot, you put it there. Now what you can't do is you can't tape it to the door, right? So you can't announce to the world that this person owes you $1,100. So don't do that. That N4 now gives this individual or your tenant 14 to 15, I believe it's 15 days to comply, right? When I say comply, it means that in 15 days they have to basically pay you, right? Or they should pay you. In a perfect world, they'll pay you in 15 days. But let's just say, for example, on the 15th or 16th day, you still don't have your money. So you still don't have your $1,100. You haven't received the $1,100 from your tenant. What do you do next? What you should be doing at that point is to fill out what's called an L1. And that's what you would do. Basically, you would go to the tribunal. So you just basically do a Google for the closest location for the tribunal. In some cases, you can do this at the Service Ontario. I wouldn't recommend that you do it at the Service Ontario because you would have to complete the form online and then take it to the Service Ontario, and the Service Ontario individuals won't be able to answer your question. So I would recommend that you go to the tribunal, because if you have any questions there, they can kind of guide you through completing the application. There's a small fee to process the L1, and the whole purpose of the L1 is to enforce your N4. That's the whole purpose, right? Now, what you don't want to do is you don't want to go to your tenant on the 16th day, on the 17th day, and try to make their life difficult. You don't want to intimidate them. You don't want to threaten them. That's not going to help you, right? In fact, it's going to help them as a tenant, because when they go to the tribunal, they're probably going to document this stuff too, and they're going to basically, bring all this stuff up, right? So don't do that. That's a waste of time. So once you've complete the L1 at the tribunal and pay the fee, then in the mail you'll get a court date as to when the tribunal is going to hear your case. And essentially, at this point, this is where you want to make sure that you have everything documented, right? As a landlord, you should be keeping a log anyhow, so you should be basically have a log as to all the times that person has paid you, the date and the time, and you would basically log times that they didn't pay you in the past, etc. But that log will help you because you want to have everything documented. You need to have everything documented, so you can't just go there and start saying, on this day, this is what happened. You want to make sure it's all written down, because you want to basically hand that over to the person that's presided over the hearing, right? So essentially they're going to ask you for, like evidence, and that's what you need to do, right? So if there was an NFS check, right, then you need to basically get a copy of that, right, and bring that with you as a part of the documentation process to show that, that person indeed owes you money, right? There was an NFS check that came back, etc. So you want to have everything documented. If there was communication between the tenant and yourself, you want to have that. You want to bring that along with you. So obviously, if this was a phone call, it's hard to bring the evidence as opposed to just writing it down to say, on this day you spoke to that person, and this is what was said, and this was the time. Again, it sounds like you're overdoing it, but you want to have as much documentation as possible, right? If it's text message, then it's perfect because you can print those out and bring those along. And I actually recommend a text message, because with a text message you can literally print that information out and sort of bring it with you as evidence to show that there was non-payment and so on. Basically, once you present your case, the tenant will obviously have an opportunity to present their case also. If you follow that N4 and the L1, and once you basically follow that process, I think that should work in your favor, in that any ruling should be sort of reasonable in your favor based on the documentation that you have obtained or documentation that you have kept. And essentially what happens from there is, like, if you won, so for example, let's just say the L1 is to sort of evict for non-payment. Once you get an approval or a go-ahead from the tribunal that you can go ahead and evict, you can literally just sort of take that order afterwards to a sheriff, right? And the sheriff will then basically be the one to carry out the eviction if it gets that far. So like if you get the order to evict, but the person pays and you want to continue on with the relationship, then that's fine. That's on you, right? But if you get the order to evict, and then it's just a matter of, from there, is taking that L1 or that sort of approval notice to the sheriff's office, and then they'll be able to get you and then from there you can basically get your eviction carried out. I'll touch more on that eviction piece from the sheriff in another video, because there's a few things that has to happen in order to get that eviction done through the sheriff's office. So I won't touch on that completely yet, but let's just focus on the N4, getting the L1 completed. And all these forms can be found online. You can just do a search for a tribunal N4 Ontario form, for example, or an L1 form, and essentially N4, within 15 days, if nothing happens, you would basically complete the L1, which is designed to enforce your N4. You'll get a tribunal date. Once you get to the tribunal, you want to make sure you have all your documentation, and then you present your case. Tenants will present their case, and as long as you're organized and you have all the facts straight, the fact that you have dotted all your I's and T's and that you have followed the process, that will work in your favor. Okay. If you have any questions, let me know. But again, I'll do a few more of these videos to kind of walk you through that process, because again, I get a lot of these questions, and I think folks are just finding the process a little bit intimidating, but it's not. You just have to make sure that you follow the process. Okay, guys? Take care.